Welcome to Flatwater Press. This is our forum, our first episode of it, and we have a great guest to get started. Former governor, state of Nebraska, and of course, U.S. Senator as well, Bob Kerrey. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Nice to be with you.
Yeah. So what do you do with yourself now? I guess that's everyone's asked me, like, what's he doing?
Very good question. I mean, I have, after my 10 years at the New School, I was offered an opportunity to be a managing director of a little merchant bank run by a family that I know well in New York City. And that's what I do. I work for them.
Do you still look at education reform, and are you still concerned about that? Is that something you monitor, being that you worked in a school?
A little bit. I mean, I'm involved with a charter school in New York City. It's Harlem RBI. We put kids in a baseball program, and what's really interesting is the correlation. How quickly, once they're part of a team, they get the confidence they can do well in school. They do well in school. All these kids go to college. I mean, it's really so. I'm involved in that. Involved in another not-for-profit called Pursuit, where we're helping kids that have graduated from high school, they've got a job, making minimum wage and maybe a little bit more. We find businesses that say, if you train them to do X, Y, and Z, we'll hire them. They come in at $18,000, go out at $81,000 a year. So, I'm still involved emeritus, not as full-time as I used to be, with this startup university out in San Francisco called the Minerva Project. Mm-hmm. But in terms of K through 12 policy, I don't really get that much engaged anymore.
But even at the secondary level, you get at the college level, the conversation of what to teach and how to teach it, and the history of our country. Are you concerned at all that there's such a not wanting to talk about the negative side of our country's history, people getting upset about CRT and things like that?
Yes. I think one of the great things about being free is that you get the opportunity to face the worst thing you ever did in your life, or the worst thing your country did, and face up to it. And the whole idea of the mission of the country is in the preamble, which is to make a more perfect union, not a perfect one. And we've got lots of moments where we did things that, looking back on it, we said, gosh, that was terrible. Why did we do that? So it makes us a better country to be able to examine it, both for the it's true for individuals. We don't become better individuals as a result of sort of whitewashing off our history and all our mistakes. We, I think, become better individuals by facing up to our mistakes. So it concerns me. I think you can be very patriotic and love the United States of America and still look and say, oh my gosh, what we did to the Native Americans, what we did to African Americans. It took us, until 1964 before we provided civil rights to African Americans, 150 years after they were liberated as slaves. So I think we need to look at those things. And I think it can enrich our enthusiasm. Young people could sometimes get turned off as a result of seeing that. But among the things we need to teach young people, not just the history, is teach them how to deal with loss, the loss of this, oh gosh, we're not as great as we thought we were. Mm-hmm. Well, we are as great as we thought we were because of that capacity. I can give you a concrete example. So I've been involved, since 1990 in the effort to normalize relations with Vietnam. We fought a war, we lost, or at least we withdrew, so we didn't win.
Right.
And in the normalization legislation, drafted first by Herbert Walker Bush and signed by Bill Clinton in 1995, contains an educational program through the Fulbright program. And I've been involved with that since 1995. I met a North Vietnamese soldier, former North Vietnamese soldier, mm-hmm. And he said to me something really, really important. He said, I used to think that the demonstrations against the war was a sign of American weakness, because that's what we were told. But now I see it's a sign of American strength, mm-hmm. That you have the capacity to demonstrate against your own government is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness.
Yeah, we've got to protect both sides of that, right?
You have to protect both sides of it. Yeah.
I always say, the Westboro Baptist Church, what they do, standing out there and upset. And as much as that hurts us and emotionally bothers us, that's their right. And we have to protect both sides.
It is their right, but I'm glad that we have law enforcement to keep me from doing damage to them when they're behaving that way.
Very true, very true. I obviously got to ask you about Vietnam. Yeah. We were listening to Chuck Hagel speak at the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Memorial groundbreaking, and he said a couple times, there are things that happen in his life now that he looks back to Vietnam and he learns stuff then that's helping him now. Right. Do you feel the same way about that war and being in that war?
Yes. I mean, first of all, we made peace with the former enemy. So I have friends, Vietnamese friends that we bombed. So we make not just peace, we're connecting in ways that we didn't connect before. So perhaps that's the most important thing. It's about being the former prime minister of Israel who died as a consequence of making peace with the Palestinians. He used to say, any fool can make peace with a friend. It's making peace with an enemy that's hard. So I'd say that's the most important thing. I think the way that Americans have examined that war, we get angry at each other over it, I think it's a sign of strength. I learned a lot from the military that I use almost every. It drives my wife crazy because I still get up at 4 o'clock in the morning as if I'm about to be inspected. So, I don't get up, but I get up every single morning grateful to be where I am and what I've been given. My country doesn't owe me anything. Right. I owe my country still.
Yeah, and we were talking about some of the difficult parts of our history in terms of, where we treated different minorities, but obviously that's a difficult part of our history too, with some of the things that happened in Vietnam. Have you come to grips with some of the things that you were part of or some of the things that happened there?
I think so, yeah. And by the way, my father was in the Second World War. We were talking about this on the drive because one of our chiefs of staff on the Senate was a guy by the name of Bob Spire. He fought in the Second Battle of the Philippines. That was an ugly battle. Yeah. They did terrible things in order to win. They won the battle. They executed the general on the Japanese side after the war was over. But Bob felt terrible about it. It's hard to find. In fact, I think it's impossible to find what some people talk about. They say, World War II was the good war. No, World War II was not a good war. It was a necessary war. Right. And we won the war and vanquished a terrible, terrible enemy. But anybody that was in that combat can hardly come back and say, gee, that was great. I went over there and killed a bunch of people. Yeah. No war is deserved to be called good. As I said, they may be necessary, they may be essential, they may be a critical moment in our history, but anybody that's killed human beings doesn't feel good about it.
Yeah, I always recommend people when they're in New Orleans going to the World War II Memorial and the museum. And it shows all the bad stuff that happened. Yeah. We were going island to island and we were having to take a lot of people out.
That's a terrific museum.
It is incredible.
It really is. Yeah. What they do that's so good is they personalize. You get a dog tag of a soldier, you know where he was.
In my wallet.
Where he came from. Yeah, it's
great.
Yeah.
So why politics? At what point in your life did you say to yourself, I want to be involved in politics?
Well, and of course, I was really affected by the Gulf of Tonkin resolution the past 7 August 1964. I was, I graduated college. I was working in pharmacy. And the next thing you know, I'm getting called up. But I didn't know what it was all about. I went and, came back. So I was very much aware of how, a decision by politicians can have a huge impact on your life. And then when I was in business, we had to get permits from the city, the county, the state, sometimes even the feds. Mm-hmm. You got to get a permit to employ yourself. So I had strong feelings about in particular the need at times to do things that are unpopular, whether school consolidation or seat belts or, making certain that the revenue equals the tax and, doing things that are important, but they don't necessarily not necessarily popular. It's an old but true adage that the most destructive force in America is uninformed public opinion. Mm-hmm. And I thought I might be good at it. Mm-hmm. Came right out of business, and I thought I might enjoy it. I believe in service. I believe you're in the biblical statement that it's better to give than to receive, and it genuinely is. Mm-hmm. And so I did it, and I went back to business after one term.
Yeah. Did you feel that you got done what you wanted to get done? Like when you were saying, okay, I'm going to run for governor, I want to get this.
Absolutely.
You got what you wanted to get
100%. Yes. The budget was balanced. We set up a rainy day fund. We took the tax writing authority and gave it back to the legislature, to the men and women who were voting to spend the money. We created a moat around our pensions so that they couldn't be ripped off by people, wanting to invest the money. So the financial foundation of the state was in much, much better shape. And those are the things I saw. Mm-hmm. Then there's other things that we did along the way, but that was the most important reason to run for governor.
Do you see a time in the state of Nebraska where we would have a Democrat in that position again?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Just it hasn't been very close in terms of those elections.
Well, we're up against a guy who's, the governor's, he's
pretty wealthy.
Well, 3/4 of the Republican budget comes from him. Yeah. So, both political parties have to be funded. And I'd say the fundraisers for the Republican Party are a lot easier than the Democratic Party.
So it is about being able to spend enough money.
Yeah, I think it is. And these things tend to go in cycles too. Democrats now, Republicans now. It's not, nothing is permanent in politics. Yeah. That's one of the great things about it. It can be frustrating because people say, oh, gosh, we fought that battle. We have to keep fighting it. And the answer is yes. You know, that's the whole idea of democracy. That's the whole idea of self-government is sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Yeah. Sometimes you're the windshield, sometimes you're the bug.
The bug, right? Yeah. There's that great line from Godfather 3 where he says, I was out and then they pulled me back in. You were out. Why'd you go back? Why did you?
I was given the opportunity. I've been with Walter Capps, graduate of Omaha Benson, came to me my last year as governor, and he said, I have a class that I'm teaching at the University of California, Santa Barbara. He was the chair of the Department of Religious Studies at UCSB. He said, would you come out and teach a class on the impact of the Vietnam War on America? And I'd see. I could spend January, February, March in Omaha, or I could spend January, February, March. So I went out there, and I never really studied the war. I didn't understand it. And so here I'm studying this very important foreign policy, and Senator Redzkowinski dies in office in March 1987. So, after I came back for the funeral and the governor or a Republican, understandably appointed Dave Carnes, a Republican. So in politics, that makes it an open seat. And had I not left the governor's office, had I not gone to Santa Barbara and sort of had my eyes open to foreign policy, I think it's unlikely I would have run for Senate. So, serendipity's played an awfully important part of my life.
Yeah. Can you compare and contrast the governing at the state level and what you have to get done in D.C.?
Well, it's a more normal job being governor. You're home all the time.
Right.
It was a lot easier for me to be a dad as governor than it is to be a dad when you're in the Senate, because in the Senate, you never know where the vote's going to happen. So in the Senate, I got to fly back to my home. My home is Omaha. My home is not Washington. So 225 days a year, I'm in Washington, or 245 days a year in Washington. You get on a plane on Friday to fly back, and it tends to disorient. You tend to, if you're not quite as, I think, as centered as you are when you're governor. I don't mean that people in Washington are somehow corrupt as a consequence of going to Washington, but it does change you. So
aren't you constantly looking to get elected again? It seems like you run, you get back in office, and it's turning around again, trying to get elected.
No, the bigger problem is you never know what the issues are going to be. So Dave Carnes and I debated in 1988 the Cold War. We were debating the MX missile in 1988. George Herbert Walker Bush swears me in January 1988, 1989, in October, the Berlin Wall falls down. And by 91, there is no Cold War any longer. All of a sudden, I got to know the difference in a Shia and a Sunni. So the issues change, and they come at you very, very fast. And the hardest part about being in the Senate is you don't get a vote back. You're constantly voting on things.
Right.
And there are times when you go down to the floor of the Senate, you're 51% certain you're right, you cast the vote, and the next day you're 51% certain you're wrong. And you don't get the chance to go back and change it. So, but on the other hand, at the Senate level, you're dealing with national issues and international issues. What America wants, what America thinks and does matters in the world. So it's in some ways it's bigger than being governor. On the other hand, being, small sometimes is really nice. You get to build things, get things that you see immediately.
A lot of times we are prisoners of the moment. And you hear people saying the divide in Washington, that aisle now is greater than ever before. You feel that way, or are we just getting back to other times that we had a divide?
Recognize this? You know what this is?
The computer in your hand.
This is an iPhone.
Yeah.
Do you know when it came on the market? 2006 or 2007? This has dramatically changed politics. Because it's not turned on now, but if I could turn it on and you were a senator, I'd ask you a question and put it up like this, hoping that you said something really stupid. I'd post it on Instagram and hope I got 1 million people following me because I want to be an influencer. Right. That's brand new.
The social media has changed. That obviously that's a big part.
It feels more like unsocial media than social. So Gary Hart goes down in a scandal in 1988. Why? Because of the fax machine. That picture of him on the boat was faxed all around if that had happened in '84,
Right.
it wouldn't have had a big impact. So technology is really changing the nature of politics. I mean, TikTok is a Chinese company, for God's sakes, and it had a huge impact on 20. And I think it's going to have a big impact in the midterm election as well. So all these changes in some ways I think it makes it more difficult, and more difficult in one big way, which is if it's let's pick a time, 1994, and you come to me and you say, Bob, last night, somebody started talking to me through the fillings of my teeth, and they said A, B, and C is going to happen, and it's just a wild and crazy conspiracy. I said, well, okay, what are you going to do about it? You going to write a book? You don't have to write a book anymore. I don't have to talk to somebody in the press and persuade them. I just post it on the internet. And there are plenty of people out there that have the same guy talking to the fillings of their teeth, and the next thing you know, you've got a conspiracy that 9/11 never happened, that nobody ever landed on the moon, that the earth is flat. So it's easier, and they can be really formidable when the member of Congress is trying to make a decision. It can really make it difficult for them to make that decision. And I think it's also contributed to an environment where it's harder to compromise. Because if you want people to follow you on Facebook, you don't get up there and behave in a rational way. You have to insult. Mm-hmm. You have to say things that aren't necessarily true to get people's attention. You want to be an influencer. And if you're calm and rational, you're not likely to be very influential. So I think that's a huge problem. I think Trump is a big problem in that regard. He didn't win the election in 20, and he's persuaded, well over half of Americans who are registered as Republican, the election was stolen. Right. It's a lie. And it's not like I'm a radical on truth telling. Everybody tells lies, for gosh sakes, but this is a big lie centered on the nature of democracy. They tried to overturn the election. That wasn't a demonstration. They would have killed Mike Pence if they'd have found him. And a lot of those guys are going to prison, for gosh sake. So, yeah, I think so. And again, I think it's a bit connected to social media because he had a huge following on Twitter. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
And that's kind of how they got the information out about January 6th, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was all over social media. Yeah. Everyone knew. Yeah. They came from all over the country.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. So we're not going backwards. Nothing's gone away with social media. We're going to keep getting more and more technology. What's the answer? How do we get more united, whether it be in the Senate, the House, or as a country, when this social media stuff that you're talking about that's a problem isn't going to go away?
Well, the most important thing is don't give up. Don't surrender to the people who become cynics and say nothing's worth doing. It's all broken. It's not all broken. It's a system. It's a system composed of human beings. And if you get angry and give up, or you get angry and say, let's blow it all up and destroy everything, you're not being constructive. You're going to sometimes lose elections. Mm-hmm. You're going to sometimes have to make the phone call to your opponent and say, congratulations, you won. Democracy is really hard. It's easier to have a dictator. Right. It's easier to have a religious leader that you have to follow. Now, we made a major break with that when we formed our republic in 1787, and it was risky.
Yeah,
and it's hard. It's really, really hard,
especially at this size, right? And the republic that big,
340 million people, and this large landmass. I mean, we have more navigable rivers in the United States of America than all other countries combined. And we're dealing right now with a huge problem that was connected to mistakes we made all the way back in 1922, allocating the stream flow of the Colorado River.
Right.
It was the best knowledge that we had at the time.
Yeah.
And it turns out
was coming like this.
Well, no, we were allocating 16.5 million acre feet, and the average stream flow was more like 14. Mm-hmm. So now we're having to start to figure out what to do from there, and it can be you can't have all winters there. The people that live in cities, in Los Angeles and Phoenix and Las Vegas, they're going to have to give up something. And the farmers are going to have to give up something.
Right.
And nobody likes to give up something. And it can be traumatic what you're talking about giving up. It can be, I got to give up, I'm making money on my farm, I got to give it up. Mm-hmm. That's easy for you to say, Senator. Right. Well, unfortunately, there's not enough water around to satisfy all the allocation needs that we thought we were going to be able to satisfy. So it can be frustrating. If you're a coal miner in West Virginia and you see the market moving towards renewable fuels, easy for me to say, that's a good thing. It doesn't feel very darn good if I'm a third generation miner and in Charleston, West Virginia. So these changes can be difficult, and it can be maddening for people. And it makes it say, can't we go back? Can't we go back to the good old days? And the answer is no. First of all, there's no such thing as the good old days.
Those good old days were really good for everybody.
No.
I guarantee that. Yeah. There were people in the 60s that it was not good.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And when you lose something, it's I lost a leg. And so I've got some personal understanding of this. I mean, you lose something, you think, can I go back? No, you've got to take the loss and figure out how to rebuild something better. Again, it's the mission of our Constitution is to try to build a more perfect union.
Do you ever think what it would have been like if you'd have been president? If you would have, you won one of the early primaries.
South Dakota.
It was still wide open at that point.
It was.
Do you ever think back what that would have been like? How it would have changed your life?
Yes, I do. I don't know how it would have changed my life.
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, it's a horrible thing to say, I suppose, but I don't.
Well, you look a lot older than you do now. Trust me, because when you come out of being president, what it does to a person, it's incredible. How much
I don't doubt my capacity to have done the job.
Yeah.
But it was a really challenging time, and the transition away from the Cold War was difficult for us to do. And I'm very proud. I mentioned it before. Herbert Walker Bush President Bush, 41, wrote the roadmap to normalization. Clinton signed the legislation, and every president all the way through Joe Biden has supported the efforts that are included in that normalization legislation. We are making peace with the farmer. We're demonstrating a post-Cold War success, bipartisan, and it's pretty great.
Do you think it would have also given us, obviously, a president from Nebraska who grew up here in Nebraska?
Yes.
Do you think that the flyover country, as they call it, the Midwest, is still, do they get enough say in what's happening in the country? It always seems like it's the coast that's the ones that are always making the...
Have you paid attention to the Electoral College?
Yeah.
I mean, do they get enough representation? I mean, the cities have to win the national election by 7 or 8 points in order to have a chance of being represented in the White House.
Right.
I'm not sure, looking at the district boundaries that were written by the Nebraska legislature, I'm not sure if you live in Lincoln or Omaha that you're ever going to get represented in Congress again. Mm-hmm. So I think the idea of flyover is a two-way street. We all have to make an effort to understand each other. The culture of New York is different than the culture of Omaha. The culture of Omaha is different than the culture of New York. In some ways, it's identical. We're patriotic in New York. We're church-going in New York. We care about our families in New York, just like we do in Omaha. But yeah, I think it's not so much the flyover. It's we're all flying over each other these days. And to make the effort to understand and acquire something that I think is maybe the most powerful thing that human beings have, which is the capacity to be sympathetic, to extend sympathy to somebody who's different than you is really important to do. Whether it's Nebraskans flying over New York. I mean, I talk to Nebraskans; they think it's Sodom and Gomorrah.
Right. Yeah. You what do you think about the direction of the Democratic Party nationally? You have a president in Joe Biden who popularity isn't high and he's of an older age. Is he the future for another 4 years? Do we need to go a different direction? The country? What do you think about the Democratic Party?
Well, I don't control the Democratic Party.
No,
I'm a Democrat, so I mean, I don't know if Joe Biden runs, I'll support him because I think he's done an exceptionally good job, independent of his approval rating. I mean, if you look at what he's got accomplished, it's pretty impressive.
But that wouldn't be true if you're, as you were talking before, you go on social media and you look at everything. That's not what's represented there.
No, but the question isn't so much what social media is saying, but I prefer unsocial media to social media because they're always yapping about stuff that's not necessarily happening because they're trying to get attention,
or even true.
Right. So no, I think if you just rationally make a list. My favorite is actually the American Rescue Plan. You can't look at the news in Nebraska and see a story that isn't connected to that American Rescue Plan. And you would think that was terrible. I mean, people who voted against it are showing up at the ribbon cuttings for all these things that are being built in the state of Nebraska. We get unemployment of 1.9%. The U.S. economy is terrible. Tell me how. Well, what's terrible? Yes, inflation is bad. Right. The demand come roaring back into the economy after COVID. And there's all kinds of supply line problems, but we're fixing it. We have piece of legislation, the first time in America's history, we're stepping up to be competitive in our industrial policy with other nations in order to establish resilience in the supply chain. You know, we got gun control legislation. We haven't had that in 30 years. It's bipartisan. We have bipartisan infrastructure bill. Even the recently passed effort. We're going to have a tax policy that really is going to enable us to be enormously competitive in energy. Mm-hmm. I chair a board of a company down in Lincoln, Nebraska called Monolith Materials. It's a terrific company. And they produce carbon black and they produce hydrogen. And both are in high demand. And these are $80,000 to $100,000 a year jobs. These are really good jobs. But they're going to get help by the recently passed legislation. Mm-hmm. Not because the government's Uncle Sugar's giving us money, but you have a tax policy that recognizes that there's alternative energies coming online, being developed by the private sector that could not just help solve the problem of climate change, but help create the kind of jobs that everybody wants our country to have. Right. So, you know, Joe Biden is so far from being a radical. Him called a radical Democrat. He is not a radical Democrat.
Yeah. Progressives don't feel he's radical.
No,
progressives like, be more progressive, please. Yeah, that's all what you said there. Obviously, you could research all that.
Yeah, yeah.
But immediately, you get in your car and your gas is higher, and you go to the store and your meat is higher. And that's what people.
Well, first of all, gas isn't higher now.
Right. It is. It was a year and a half ago.
Yeah. I mean, I saw about Western Nebraska gas is like $3.85 a gallon. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So no, I mean we had a significant amount of inflation, and it occurred because we had no demand. Yeah. Businesses are used to doing just-in-time inventory, and all of a sudden they got to have more inventory. Cars are a great example of that. It's hard to find a used car that wasn't priced twice what you paid for it originally. So,
right. Well, even a bicycle. It's almost hard to find a bicycle.
It's short. I mean, we've got big supply side problems. But I do think in particular the recently passed, I think they call it the CHIPS bill, and that really is going to help us not just on supply problems, but it's going to help us be able to maintain our competitive position in high technology industries. So yeah, inflation is a real problem. Gas prices, nobody likes to pay higher gas prices. And it's for truckers, it's a problem. For farmers, it's a problem because they're paying even more for diesel.
Yeah.
It's a really important issue.
Yeah. Two more questions.
Yeah.
In terms of that, because you said don't quit. Obviously, don't look at everything and say that it's helpless. But do you feel that we are headed in a direction where the country is going to be better, or even feel better about itself? Over these next 4 years, are we headed that direction?
Well, feeling better about yourself and actually being better are two different things. Do I think we're going to be stronger? Yes. Do I think we're going to have? I think we're going to have a competitive advantage in biotech. I think we're going to have breakthroughs in medicine. I'm right now being treated for prostate cancer, right. And I'd be dead 10 years ago. All the advances that are being. My daughter was treated with breast cancer. She's all the way through that whole thing. I'm not sure she survived 20 years ago. So all these changes that are occurring now, people sometimes can't afford it. Strike sometimes. Oftentimes they can't afford it at all. So there's a lot of problems, and you might not feel good about that. Especially, I would say the generation just behind me, or maybe generation and a half behind me. They're looking and saying, I've got $150,000 of college debt. I can't, easy for you to say, Bob, you graduated from college in 1965. Tuition was $132 a semester.
Yeah.
You could make $12,000 a year and buy a car. You can't make $12,000 a year and buy a bunch of anything by the time you're older. So it's easy to see why people don't feel good about the future. And I think there's I don't know if it's a majority or how many people feel that way. But if you actually look at the facts, we're in pretty darn good shape.
Yeah, I think it depends on where you live. It really does. I think that's a big part.
But we're going to, on the 1st of January, thanks to inflation, Social Security beneficiaries are going to get a 10% increase in their payment. Right. So everybody in Nebraska over the age of 65 is going to get a real boost in their income. Will that make them feel better about the future? I don't know. I'm not sure they'll be told that by anybody other than the check coming in the mail.
Right.
On the other side of that, that's $100 billion a year. And if you're, let's say, how old are you?
53.
All right. So you're 53. You got another 12 years, and it's fair for you to say, what's it going to look like 12 years from now? Well, I'll tell you what it's going to look like. either you're going to get a cut in your benefits or somebody's going to have to pay more taxes. So you look at the future and you're going to say, great, Bob, you're 78 years old. Social Security is working for you, but I'm 50. I'm not sure it's going to be there when I become eligible.
And we have to save more on our own, knowing that it's not going to get backed up by stuff coming back from Social Security. That's, in general, my age group. Or we got to work till 75.
Yeah, right.
One of the two.
Yeah.
How often do you go across your bridge?
Oh, gosh, I'm always, this is one of the few times coming back that I have gone across it.
Yeah. What's that like?
Well, I mean, first of all, the big idea there came from a serendipitous discovery that the Constitution of Nebraska and the Constitution of Iowa are different in one big way. When the river moves, when land is created, new land is acquired. Mm-hmm. In Nebraska, the Constitution says that's private property. In Iowa, it's public property. That's why, they got hundreds of miles of bike trails over there. So I said, well, all we need is a bridge, a pedestrian and a bike bridge that goes over that thing, and we get access to all these trails, and it's worked. Yeah. It actually has worked. No, but my first time, my favorite political story, first time across that bridge, the guy's coming from Iowa, full speed on a bicycle. And I hear him hit the brake, screech to get back. And he says, I didn't vote for you for governor. I voted against you every time you ran for office. I didn't like you. Anything you did, I didn't even like this bridge, but I was wrong. This is great. Thank you. And off he went.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I don't know if he wants to go as your legacy, but I don't go on that bridge. I'm telling you, without seeing somebody propose to somebody. It is a unifying thing.
It is really.
People go up there and get engaged all the time.
With 1 foot in Iowa and 1 foot.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
That's pretty great.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Well, Senator, we really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Taking the time.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Stay healthy.
I will. You too.